According to Quentin Tarantino, this is what Hans Landa, the evil Nazi detective from the 2009 film Inglourious Basterds, is up to after the events of the movie.
I like the idea of, again, I don't think I'll do it, but I like the idea of writing a series of Hans Landa mysteries. So it's like 20 years after World War II, and he's living on Nantucket, and then a murder happens on the island, and he's the detective.
Oh my God.
And he's the amateur detective, even though he's one of the great detectives in the world, all right? And he figures out who the murderer is.
He's got the pipe ready.
And that would be a series of Hans Landa mysteries.
It sounds insane to imagine him quietly solving crimes in Nantucket like a Nazi Sherlock Holmes, but this actually makes perfect sense for his character and his outlook on life. In this video, we're going to examine why. We first meet Landa in the iconic opening scene of Inglourious Basterds as he enters Perrier Lapidite's home in search of the Dreyfus family. After a long conversation in which Lapidite's daughter pours him a frothy glass of milk, Landa smokes a big-ass pipe, and Christoph Waltz flexes his language skills, this is the line of reasoning Landa gives for how he knows that the Dreyfuses are hiding under the floorboards.
A German soldier conducts a search of a house suspected of hiding Jews. Where does the hawk look? He looks in the barn, he looks in the attic, he looks in the cellar, he looks everywhere he would hide. But there's so many places it would never occur to a hawk to hide. However, the reason the Führers brought me off my Alps in Austria and placed me in French cow country today is because it does occur to me. You're sheltering them underneath your floorboards, aren't you?
Yes.
As memorable as Landa's monologue might be, it still doesn't explain how he knows exactly where the Dreyfuses are located. Even if Landa psychologically understands the desperation of a victim like he claims, there could be any number of unusual places to hide on Lapidite's property, and Landa doesn't talk us through his logic on how he narrowed it down to the floorboards specifically. But it doesn't matter. Because it's not how Landa solves a mystery that makes him a genius. It's how he corners his victims. It's how, in what for all intents and purposes is just a normal casual conversation in a kitchen, Landa gets Lapidite to completely break his resolve and confess to hiding the family in his home. And this underpins exactly why Landa is so terrifying. It's not because he's a genius detective, it's because he's a genius with people.
Because I'm a people person.
Later, at the crime scene of the shootout at the bar, Landa finds a napkin with Bridget von Hammersmark's signature on it and makes the genius deduction that Bridget von Hammersmark probably had something to do with this. But it's the way that Landa reveals his knowledge to von Hammersmark that makes us shiver. At the premiere, he takes von Hammersmark to a private room and creepily takes off her shoe while making her pull the shoe he found at the crime scene out of his jacket, allowing the fear and realization that he knows she's a spy to dawn on her before he violently strangles her. In that same scene at the premiere, just about anybody could have heard Aldo Raine speak and figured out that maybe this guy's not actually Italian.
Buongiorno.
Yeah, Landa's not exactly a genius for that one. Again, what really makes Landa so frightening is how he plays with his food. He doesn't do his job just to get it out of the way. He could have easily murdered the Dreyfus family the moment he stepped into Lapidite's home without all the decorum of conversing with Lapidite to make him confess, since Landa clearly already knew where the Dreyfuses were hiding. He could have just taken von Hammersmark aside and killed her instantly, no foot fetish theatrics needed. He could have done the same with the Bastards instead of messing with them in Italian for 2.5 minutes.
Come si chiama lei? Antonio Margarete. Ancora? Margarete.
And he could have easily killed young Shoshana Dreyfus as she was fleeing the farmhouse in the first scene. But instead, Landa lowers his gun to bid her an au revoir that haunts her for the rest of her life. In the strudel scene where Landa meets Emmanuelle Mimieux several years later, the tension lies in the question that both we as the audience and Emmanuelle have. Will Landa recognize her as Shoshana? As far as what we've seen in the film, we have no concrete reason to believe that he would know her true identity. Yet this moment seems to almost confirm, or at least strongly suggest, that he probably does.
Il y avait une autre chose que je voulais vous demander. Mais maintenant, sur ma vie, impossible de m'en souvenir. Enfin, bon, ce ne devait pas être important.
The reason this scene is so chilling is precisely because of Landa's ability to corner his victims, revealing to them their worst fears, reflecting their worst impulses back on them. Though we have no evidence to suggest how he would know her true identity, we believe there's a real possibility he might, not because of any actual investigation or calculation on his part, but simply because we're convinced he's capable of it, and we recognize that pattern of intimidation from his interactions with other people in this scene with Shoshana. But all this begs the question, why does Landa play with his food? What does he get out of it? To solve that mystery, let's try to pin down what Landa's philosophy on life actually is. This is what Christoph Waltz, actor of Hans Landa, has to say about his character's role as a Nazi. Quote, "I don't think these swastikas are so important to him. It's not so much ego-driven, it's just a very thorough understanding of how the world works. Yes, he wears that uniform, but he doesn't care. Not about Nazi ideology. He's completely unideological. He just understands how the world turns, and in that way, he's 3 steps ahead of everyone else." In that same interview, Waltz calls Landa realistic to the point where it is bordering the inhuman, and he's exactly right. Landa's not moral or even immoral necessarily, he's amoral. He doesn't care if he's fighting for the good guys or the bad guys, as long as they're the guys who win. This is why he could just as easily be solving crimes on Nantucket as he could be hunting down innocent people as a Nazi. It's also why, at the end of the film, instead of doing away with the bastards after he captures them, Landa instead offers them a deal. He will allow them to win the war in exchange for his public recognition as a spy for the Allies, a handful of congressional medals, and a private residence on Nantucket Island. Landa doesn't become a Nazi because he believes in their ideology, nor does he betray them because he sides with the Allies. Ultimately, he dictates all his actions based on what is personally advantageous for him given the situation at hand. When the Nazis rose to power, he made himself useful to them to secure his own power and safety. When signs indicated that Germany would lose the war, he switched sides and made arrangements so he would still be living his best life in America. His deep understanding of changes and fluctuations in the world allows him to analyze circumstances to determine what course of action will ensure an ideal life for himself. He doesn't have a vested interest in any of the pursuits he undertakes. His only interest is to achieve the best possible outcome. For instance, see how he changes his tune on his reputation as the Jew hunter. Whereas earlier in the film, Landa claimed to take pride in this moniker, later he tells the bastards he never shared the Nazi agenda.
I, on the other hand, love my unofficial title, precisely because I've earned it. Finding people is my specialty, so naturally I worked for the Nazis finding people, and yes, some of them were Jews, but Jew hunter? Just a name that stuck.
Again, Landa's only ideology is his lack of ideology. In that way, he's an opportunist, but he's also something of a nihilist. He believes there is no inherent meaning in life, that your actions only have consequences insofar as they can gain or cost you power and status. There is no objective judgment on or greater significance to life beyond the simple relationship between actions and consequences. So now we have a good understanding of Landa's philosophy on life, but we still haven't answered the question, why does he go to such lengths to mess with his victims before neutralizing them? To answer this, let's listen to Waltz's own philosophy on acting, specifically on playing the villain. When asked how he feels about playing so many bad guys throughout his career, Waltz responds that, quote, "The good guy, bad guy consideration is something that the audience should have, not me. I don't look at that. I don't pass moral judgments on characters that I'm asked to play. I just look at whether there's something I can contribute valuably to the telling of the story."
I played so many evil people.
That's why I'm asking you.
Well, yeah, but you know that's a judgment. You can't play a judgment. You can't play your opinion. You can play the thing.
In other words, Waltz's approach to acting is realistic. And like Waltz himself, Hans Landa is an actor, a role player. He plays whichever role he needs to in the moment without any qualms on what kind or how dark that role might be. Just as Waltz doesn't pass moral judgment on his characters, Landa doesn't pass moral judgment on any of his actions. To him, life is a game, a play. And maybe that's why Landa takes such pleasure in playing with his victims. It's the kind of freedom that every actor craves when getting into their role. Landa takes pride in seeing through what he believes are the illusions of life, illusions like truth and honor and morality. His view of life is ultimately nihilistic. To him, there are no rules, no moral codes or inherent meanings, and the only rule is to keep winning, to keep your head above water no matter how the tides turn. So, in a world where nothing really matters, maybe the one pleasure Landa has is committing to his roles to the fullest. For someone who is otherwise completely cold, calculating, and logical in hunting down his victims, this may be the one opportunity he gets to play, to experience a sense of self-satisfaction that he's above humans, unbound by their rules and morals and feelings, and each time he wins, it's proof that his view of life is superior.
That's a bingo!
Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just say bingo.
At the very end of the film, Landa finally gets some level of comeuppance when Aldo Raine carves a swastika into his forehead. While we might think he deserves far worse punishment than that, it's the perfect poetic justice to close out his arc in the story. Because the one thing that Landa didn't factor into his calculations is that Aldo Raine, unlike Landa, is human. He's not an actor. In fact, he's a very bad actor, as evidenced by his attempt to pretend to be Italian. But it means that Aldo Raine, unlike Landa, doesn't always do what's advantageous in the moment. He tortures Landa despite the consequences, despite knowing that his government and military superiors will punish him for doing so. He acts on feeling and moral principle. It's fitting, then, that what ultimately brings Landa down isn't a fault in his plan or another genius that outsmarts him, but a mere bastard human.
You know something, you rich? I think this just might be my masterpiece.